Now there are different kinds of fractions. And different ways to write them. Okay? Now we're going to have a whole series of words, ideas here, which will get at this divided up fraction number kind of concept. Okay? So, for starters, what you're used to seeing as a fraction is what we call a common fraction. Common fraction. Okay? So, I'll give you an example for all of these. Okay? What's the most common fraction you can think of? A half. And we write it like this. Right? 1/2 is how we might read it. Okay? Now, these different parts of a fraction, they all have names. Do we know some of the names? There are 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. Does anyone know what they're called? Yep.
The denominator?
Which one's the denominator?
The bottom?
It's the 2, isn't it? So that's the denominator. Right? Okay, yes?
The numerator, which is the top number.
Good. This guy up here, the 1, is the numerator. Okay, but bonus points. Who knows what that thing in the middle is called?
It's a line.
And it is a line, but it's not called a line.
A line.
Line is not called a line.
I'll give you a tip. It starts with the letter V. Anyone think they know it? Okay. It's a weird. I think I heard it somewhere.
Vegetarian?
It's called a vinculum. Okay, that was almost okay. All right, so there you go. There are the pieces of a common fraction. Okay. But there's different kinds of types of fraction, right? For instance, when the denominator is bigger than the numerator, like if you had, say, 3/2, okay? We call that something else. This one is a proper fraction because the numerator is smaller. Does anyone know what it's called? Can anyone guess what it's called when the numerator is bigger? Yep. Improper. Good. So an improper fraction, the example I just gave you was 3/2. But anywhere where the numerator is bigger than the denominator, 7/4, 8/5, and on, that's an improper fraction. Okay? One more kind of fraction that we're interested in, sort of a fraction. Does anyone know what it's called? Yep.
Mixed numeral.
Mixed numeral is good. Now I'm running out of space here, so I'm going to write a line here. This was sort of 1, 2, 3, a mixed numeral. So you have a look at this improper fraction, right? And the funny thing about it, like the idea of a fraction is that it's a part, right? It's not the whole thing, it's just, one divided section of it, right? But here, there's actually an integer hiding in there, isn't there? If I can separate it out, you can see there's a 1 hiding in there, right? Because I can write 3/2, right? I can write that separately as 2 plus 1/2, right? And one of the things we know about fractions is that you can separate out that numerator. Can't do it with the denominator. I want you to have a think about why. But you can separate out the numerator, like so. Okay? This guy down the bottom, he clones, a bit creepy like that. But anyway, okay? Now 2/2, as you said, that's an integer. That's 1, and then we just write that a half there, 1.5. Okay? By the way, what I just did there is how you convert from an improper fraction to a mixed numeral. How would you go about the other way? If I gave you 1.5, you know what it's equal to, but how do you get that? Yeah, do you want to go?
Do 2 times 1.
Okay, so I've got 1.5, right? So I say 2 times 1, and then what do I do with that? That's 2. Now what?
You add 1.
I add it, don't I? I add it to there. So it sort of goes around like that. Okay, so that's how you get to the 2 plus 1/2, which is exactly what we had over here. And that's why it's 3/2. Let's see if you really get it. What was the other one I gave before? I said, let's try a bigger one. Let's try 18/5. That's also an improper fraction. How can we convert this into a mixed numeral? Yep.
Do I have to say how to do it, or do I just say the answer?
No, we need to know how to do things, right?
Like the little,
What should I write next? Okay, yeah, Rachel.
You divide 18 by 5, which is 3, so you do 3 on the side. 3 and the remainder up the top.
What is the remainder, by the way? It's also 3, isn't it? 3/5. Good. Okay. Yep, the idea. All right. Excellent. Now I'm just going to. I need a little bit more space. These were the three types of fractions. Okay. Now with this same idea of divided up stuff, fractions have some cousins. Okay. You don't have to call this subheading cousins of fractions, but the other things that are very similar to fractions are percentages. Right, and we're going to have a look at these as well. So things like 50%. 50%. That's important.
Percentages.
That's where the word percentage comes from, right?
Percentages.
But what does it mean? It means out of 100. Like as in century or centurion, right? So it means
Or like
out of 100. Okay? And lastly, percentages, fractions, and the last one I want to look at is decimals. Okay? So for example, can someone tell me what is the decimal of a half or 50%? They're all the same. How would I write it? James?
0.5.
Yeah, good. 0.5. 0 does matter, right? So when you say 0.5, you're like, oh, okay, I know what that is. But the 0 is important to have there.